hall looked exactly the way my daughter had described it to me over the phone, back when she first told me she'd found the perfect venue. High ceilings, warm lighting, round tables draped in ivory linen. I remember thinking, good, she deserves something beautiful. What I didn't expect was to be standing at the edge of that beautiful room, holding a glass of water I hadn't touched, listening to my son-in-law's mother say into a live microphone that I was, quote, just the wallet that showed up. The laughter that followed was immediate. Not polite, not nervous. Genuine laughter, the kind that rolls through a room and settles in your chest long after it's gone quiet again. My daughter laughed too, not a big laugh. Just a smile she tried to hide behind her champagne glass. But I saw it. I've known that face for 31 years. I know when she's laughing at a joke, and I know when she's laughing because the room expects her to. This was somewhere in the middle, which was somehow worse. I set my water glass down on the nearest table and I didn't say a word. I should back up, because none of this happened in a vacuum. My name doesn't matter much for this story. What matters is that I'm 63 years old. I spent 35 years working in commercial construction management, and I am not a man who talks about money. My father raised me to believe that talking about what you spend is the same as bragging about it, and even when things got tight, he never complained out loud. I inherited that from him. For better or worse. When my wife passed 11 years ago, it was just me and my daughter. She was 20 at the time, finishing her second year of college. I kept working, she kept studying. We figured it out together, the two of us, the way you do when there's no other option. She graduated, got a good job, met a young man who seemed decent enough. His name is Crispin. I know, it's a name that takes some getting used to, and he works in finance. Which means he talks about money constantly but never seems to have quite enough of it at the right moment. That's not a criticism. It's just an observation. The engagement came 3 years into their relationship. My daughter called me on a Tuesday evening, crying happy tears, and I told her I was proud of her, and that I loved her, and that I couldn't wait to meet the ring. That made her laugh. It was a good night. The trouble started, as it often does, slowly. The first conversation about the wedding happened over dinner at my house, just the three of us. My daughter had a notebook. She'd been doing research. She showed me venue options, caterer estimates, florist quotes. The numbers were larger than I expected, but I didn't say that. I asked questions. I tried to understand what she was picturing. At the end of the evening, Crispin excused himself to use the restroom, and my daughter leaned across the table and took my hand. Dad, she said, his family doesn't have a lot. I told her I understood. I mean, they really don't. His mom is on a fixed income and his dad is out of the picture. There's no one on his side who can contribute. I told her that was okay. She squeezed my hand and said, "You're the only one who can make this happen." I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised, this person who had her mother's eyes and my stubbornness, and I said, "Tell me what you need." What she needed turned out to be considerable. I want to be precise here, not because I'm keeping score, but because precision matters when you're trying to understand what came next. Over the course of 14 months, I paid for the venue deposit, the venue balance, the catering contract, the photographer, the videographer, the florist arrangements, 2 rounds of alterations on the dress, after she changed her mind about the silhouette, the rehearsal dinner at a restaurant I'd never heard of that cost more per person than my first car payment, transportation for the wedding party, and what my daughter referred to as day of coordination, which as far as I could tell meant a woman in a headset who told everyone where to stand. The total was just over $91,000. I didn't tell anyone that number. Not my daughter, not Crispin, not my brother, nobody. I just paid each invoice as it arrived and filed the receipts in a folder on my desk that I never opened twice. Crispin's mother, a woman named Victorine, and before you ask, yes, that's her actual name, she introduced herself 3 times at the engagement party to make sure I pronounced it correctly, contributed a cake. It was a very nice cake. 3 tiers Italian buttercream. I complimented it sincerely. His uncle gave them a set of cookware. His cousin, who works in event photography, offered to take candid shots as a gift, which created some friction with the professional photographer I'd hired, but we worked through it. And that was the sum total of contributions from the other side. Again, I'm not complaining about that. Families have different circumstances. What I am telling you is the context, because context is the only way this story makes sense. I arrived at the venue on the afternoon of the wedding, feeling the particular kind of tired that isn't about sleep. I'd been moving things, solving problems, writing checks for 3.5 months straight. The morning of the wedding, I'd gotten a call from the florist about a delivery issue, and then a call from the caterer about a dietary accommodation that hadn't been communicated, and then a text from my daughter asking me to please call the venue about the parking situation. I handled all 3 before 8 in the morning. ate a piece of toast, put on my suit, and drove to the church. The ceremony was lovely. My daughter was radiant. Crispin cried when she came down the aisle, which I respected. I walked her down myself, which she'd asked me to do, and which meant more to me than I'll ever be able to say out loud without embarrassing myself. I found my seat at the reception feeling, for the first time in months, like maybe the hard part was over. It wasn't. The toast started during the first course. Crispin's best man went first. Perfectly fine speech, some jokes about college that I didn't fully follow, a sincere ending. My daughter's maid of honor went next, and she made everyone cry in the good way, talking about my wife, about how my daughter carried her mother with her every day. I had to look at the ceiling for a while during that part. Then Victorine stood up. She's a small woman, Victorine. Barely 5 feet tall with silver hair cut very short and reading glasses that she wears on a beaded chain. She has the kind of energy that fills a room before she says anything, the way some people do. I'd met her maybe 6 or 7 times before this night. She was always cordial to me, in the way that people are cordial when they haven't decided what they think of you yet. She picked up the microphone. She talked about Crispin first, which was appropriate. Her son, her pride, how she'd raised him after his father left, how hard he'd worked. All of that was true, and I had no issue with any of it. Then she turned toward the room, toward the tables full of family and friends, toward the high ceilings and the warm light and the ivory linens, and she said, "And we are so grateful for all of this." She gestured broadly, taking in the venue. "This is a beautiful evening," she said. "Just beautiful. It must have cost a fortune." She laughed, and the room laughed with her, that easy laugh of a crowd that's warm and well-fed and happy. Of course, we have the wallet to thank for that. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the room. "The wallet that showed up," she said, and laughed again, and the room went with her. I don't know if she meant it the way it landed. I've thought about that a lot since. I don't know if she rehearsed it or if it came out in the moment, or if she'd been saying something like it among her family for months. And it had just become the way they referred to me. The wallet. The wallet that showed up. Not a father, not a man who loved his daughter. A function. The room laughed. My daughter smiled into her champagne glass. And then something happened that I did not expect. Crispin stood up. He's not a big talker, Crispin. That's one of the things I'd come to appreciate about him over 3 years. He listens more than he speaks, which is rarer than it sounds. He'd never said much to me directly about the wedding finances. He'd thanked me twice briefly in passing. I hadn't expected more than that. He stood up from his seat next to my daughter, and he reached over and held out his hand toward the person holding the secondary microphone, the one that had been passed around for toasts. "May I?" he said. The room quieted. He looked at his mother with an expression I couldn't fully read from where I was sitting. Not anger, not embarrassment, something more complicated than either of those. "Mom," he said, "I love you. You know that." Victorine smiled, nodded, still holding the microphone. "But I need to say something," Crispin said, "because I should have said it a long time ago." He turned to face the room, and then he turned until he was looking directly at me. "This man," he said, "paid for every single thing you see in this room tonight. The flowers, the food, the music, the lights, every chair you're sitting on. He paid for my wife's dress and the photographer who is right now capturing this moment, and the car that brought us here." He paused. He did it without being asked twice. He did it without telling anyone the number. He did it because he loves his daughter. The room was very still. "He is not a wallet," Crispin said. "He is the reason this night is possible, and I am ashamed it took my mother's joke for me to stand up and say that out loud." He looked back at his mother. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but that wasn't right." He set the microphone down on the table. I had been looking at my water glass. I looked up. My daughter was not smiling into her champagne anymore. She was looking at me with an expression I recognized, the one she'd had as a little girl when she knew she'd done something wrong, but didn't quite know how to begin fixing it. The room began to applaud. Slowly at first, then fuller. I didn't stand up. I didn't make a speech. I'm not built that way. I just held my daughter's gaze across the room and gave her a small nod, the kind that means, "We'll talk later and it'll be okay, and I love you, but we will talk." She nodded back. We did talk. Not that night. That night was still a celebration, and I wasn't going to take that from her. But 2 days later, when the couple had returned from their first night away, and my daughter came to my house alone, we sat at the kitchen table where we'd eaten 10,000 meals together, and we talked for almost 2 hours. She told me she'd known for a long time, maybe always, that her in-laws referred to me that way. Not cruelly, she said, more like shorthand, more like it had become a running private thing among them. The wallet. She'd heard it once and hadn't corrected it. Then it became something she'd heard enough times that correcting it felt like too much work. I asked her if she believed it. She was quiet for a moment. "I think," she said carefully, That I let myself believe you didn't mind. Because you never said anything. Because you just kept. She stopped. Tried again. You kept writing checks and I kept accepting them and I told myself it was love. It was love, I said. I know. But that's not all it was, I said. It was also your mother not being here. It was also me trying to be enough for both of us. And somewhere in there I forgot to tell you that I needed you to see me. Not the checks. Me. My daughter put her face in her hands and cried. I let her cry. That's something I learned early on. You have to let people get to the other side of their tears before you can really talk to them. So I sat there and I waited and I put my hand on her shoulder, and after a while the crying slowed. Crispin never called you that, she said when she could speak again. Not once. I think he was embarrassed by it and he waited too long to say something. He said it when it counted, I said. She looked up at me. He said it in a room full of people, I said. At the worst possible moment, when it cost him something to say it. That tells me a lot about who my daughter married. She laughed a little, wet and uneven. He's going to be a good husband, I said. I believe that. He is, she said. He really is. We sat there a while longer in the kitchen. The afternoon light coming through the window above the sink, the way it always has in that house. She asked me what I needed from her going forward. Not what she thought I needed, what I actually needed. It was the right question to ask. I told her I needed to be her father. Not a financial resource, not a safety net, not a function she activated when a bill arrived. Her father. The man who walked her down the aisle and cried at the ceiling during the toast and has her mother's photograph on the mantel in the living room. You've always been that, she said. Then let me be that, I said. Let me be that first. Everything else comes after. She reached across the table and took my hand, the same way she had that night at dinner when she'd said, you're the only one who can make this happen. But this time she didn't say anything. She just held on. Victorine called me the following week. A long call, longer than I expected. She apologized. She told me she hadn't intended it as an insult. And I believe her, or at least I believe that she believes that, which might not be exactly the same thing, but it's close enough to work with. She said she'd been nervous at the microphone and the joke had come out wrong. I told her I appreciated the call. She asked if we could start over. I said I thought that was a fine idea. I don't know if we'll ever be close. Some distances are too established to fully close. But I'm not carrying a grudge about it, and that's not nothing. I have enough weight I'm already carrying. That was 8 months ago now. My daughter and Crispin came for dinner last Sunday. She brought a casserole she'd made herself, which is notable, because up until about 3 years ago, she claimed she couldn't cook anything that didn't come in a box. I made my mother's cornbread, and we sat at that kitchen table until almost 10 o'clock, talking about nothing in particular. Their apartment, a trip they're planning, a disagreement they'd had about a piece of furniture. Normal things. Good things. At one point, Crispin was doing the dishes. He insists on doing the dishes. Every single time, I've stopped arguing about it. And my daughter came and stood next to me at the kitchen counter and leaned her head on my shoulder for a moment, the way she used to do when she was small. Hey, Dad, she said. Yeah, thank you for everything. I put my arm around her. You're welcome, I said, for everything. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the dark. The kitchen smelled like cornbread and dish soap. My daughter's head was on my shoulder. I thought about the venue, the ivory linens, the high ceilings. I thought about standing at the edge of that room, holding a glass of water I never drank, and then I let it go. Not because it didn't matter. It did. It still does a little, in the way that certain things always will. But I've learned, at 63, that the things you hold on to have a way of crowding out the things that are actually happening right in front of you. What was happening right in front of me was my daughter's head on my shoulder and my son-in-law doing my dishes, and the neighbor's dog settling down and going quiet. That's enough. That's more than enough.